Hello guys, welcome back to another generic essay series video, and today I will be reviewing every superhero movie, TV show, or special presentation that has come out in the last 6 months. As 6 months ago, on June 30th, I did the same thing for the films that came out in the 6 months up to that point. So let's get into it, but first, my name is Tyler, and I love film. And today, I'll be talking about the rest of the 2022 superhero films, movies, and special presentations. First, I would like to point out Ms. Marvel, since it didn't technically complete its run last time I made the video, and I said if I changed any thoughts or had anything else to say about the show, then I would say it in this video. And no, my rating for this does not change. It stays a 7 out of 10. Overall, the show does its job, but doesn't do anything too extraordinary. Thor Love and Thunder is a film that I've had a hard time deciding what I really think of it. As with all MCU movies, I imagine a version of the movie that I hope it to be. And this film was definitely not like it, and none of the films have been recently. Oftentimes, I hope these films exceed my expectations and plots I make up in my mind. And this film, when I watched it, I had fun with it, but I had a few nagging criticisms with the movie that really bothered me and that I had to look past to enjoy the film that I could never truly look past. That was on first viewing. I found it funny, lighthearted, and in some parts surprisingly good, but overall not what I was expecting. But I didn't completely see that as a bad thing and took it for what it was, wishing it was something else, but accepting it for what it actually was. Then on rewatch, I really noticed how bad some of these problems with the film were. A lot of shots in this film, even without CGI, look very cheap, and it is a massive downgrade from Thor Love and Thunder, which is made by the same crew, so this shouldn't be happening. Not all the jokes landed. Some of them did seem to have come off as annoying a second time around. Some of the dumb things that happened in this film really shouldn't have happened the way that they did, and it just really embarrasses the idea of what the Thor character used to be. That is, in the MCU at least, since this film, while I don't think it's horrible and works enough once you have to make it work, doesn't give Thor a meaningful journey that follows up on everything he's been through from Infinity War and Endgame. That is partially Endgame's fault, but just as much this film's fault. Other people have picked my next two criticisms apart better, so I'm not going to spend too much time trying to elaborate on something that's probably already been said. But Christian Bale as Gorr the God Butcher is completely wasted. His character visually isn't interesting, and isn't interesting either with his ideals or threat to Thor, but he is one of the better Marvel villains and works where he needs to, and more so than many other villains we've gotten in the MCU, so he's decent enough. Also, this film does have tonal issues. It's not tonal whiplash, and I don't think it's as bad as many other people say it is. At some parts, it kind of works in its favor, but they really should have spent more time with Jane and Cancer developing the idea of that and making it more consistent throughout the film. Overall, inconsistency is my main problem with this film. I give this film what once was an 8.4, a 7 out of 10. Yes, DC League of Super Pets is on this list and did indeed come out this year. It is exactly what it sounds like it is. It is actually a decent kids movie and has some very neat moments. I will say no more than it works where it needs to, story and character-wise, and has that extra superhero flair. I give this film an 8.2 out of 10. Samaritan, while not being a Marvel or DC film, is a superhero movie that is based on a comic book, technically, that has come out in the last 6 months, or a comic for the movie was released before the movie came out, and it did take some inspiration from some Marvel, DC, and non-Marvel and DC comics. So there's my explanation for why this is featured in this video, and I said comic book superhero movies in the title. You better have read it. To sum it up, Samaritan is a very interesting film. It is a more low-key and humble superhero film that does go ambitious in some parts of its story. It's not the greatest thing ever. Its story is and pacing are very wonky at parts, but this film is able to deliver a good time and has a great twist and does everything it needs to do well, and most importantly is a very interesting battle of ideals that we haven't found in many superhero films this year. It's not the greatest thing ever, I will say that, but I do think this film should get some love. So that's why I'm giving it compliments. I give this film a 7.2 out of 10. She-Hulk is a show that when I watched it, I already thought had a rocky start with its first two episodes and a very lackluster third episode. And when I got to the credit scene of that third episode to She-Hulk twerking, I lost all faith in this show. But to try to focus in on one main critical objective problem that I find with the show, I will say that I don't like how the show seems unable to completely focus on its actual characters and their development properly, and instead tries to establish a vibe that I don't think works too well in the first place. This show has some moments. It's not the worst thing I've ever seen, but I will never watch this again. I give this show a 5.6 out of 10. Oh yeah, last episode. It was interesting. It could have been cool, but it was just okay. It was entertaining, not horrible. And Daredevil, again, wasn't amazing, entertaining, not horrible. And everything else in this show, lackluster. Werewolf by Night is what many have deemed a breath of fresh air in the MCU, and I think it is a breath of fresh air, and mainly a breath of fresh air to Marvel Phase 4. But aside from a few cool shots, a great tone, and the fact that it does some things differently in a very interesting way, Werewolf by Night isn't a masterpiece and has a few wasted opportunities and at sometimes feels weirdly cheap, but that does add on to the MCU horror vibe. Overall, Werewolf by Night does everything it needs to do right and is the better of the two special presentations, the latter of which I will get into later, as it does exactly what it should do. It is thoroughly entertaining, and it is remarkable how it establishes and develops the characters it introduces in this film in only a little under 50 minutes. I give this short film a 8.5 out of 10. Black Adam is a superhero flick this year that I do not think deserves as much hate as it gets, and is definitely not as bad as you've heard. While at times things in this film feel generic, I would like you to remember that this film has been in development for about 15 years. Don't ask me why, that is a different over 10-minute long video that I will not make. In addition to that possible flaw, this film does have some plot conveniences and can be unfocused like many other superhero things recently in its story, plot, and ideals, and is inconsistent with a lot of things, but overall Black Adam isn't trying to be a biting social commentary like some may hope. It is trying to be an action blockbuster, and for the first time for a superhero movie this year, I think it fully worked at that. I give this film an 8.2 out of 10. Black Panther Wakanda Forever is a good film, but not a great film. It has wasted potential, even though it was dealt a bad hand, but it is remarkable that this film turned out as well as it did, and that should be commemorated. One of my biggest problems with the film is the betrayal of Namor. I'm not a fan of the changing of the pronunciation of his name or his origin or the changing of the name of his people from Atlanteans to the T word, but I'm able to look past that because that part of him, his sympathetic parts, work well enough, but nothing about him stood out too much to me as a Marvel villain, and he fell short in a lot of places and didn't command the stage as much as he needed to for this film or carry the film in any way whatsoever. He did not feel menacing at all and had absolutely no gravitas, and everything else about him, like I said, was done to its nearly most minimal extent. Before I get into my next of two major problems with this movie, I must commemorate that I love how this film looks, and was thoroughly entertained by the first 30 minutes of this movie before I began to start thinking critically again. This film does start off very strong, at least when compared to the rest of the movie. My first of my next two problems with this film is how unnecessary some things in this film feel. The film does happen to be a 2 hour and 40-minute film, and I don't think it uses that runtime or justifies it or earns it at all completely. There are plenty of unnecessary things in this film, things that could have been cut out to make this film hit harder and not drag, which it does drag at times. There are plenty of necessary things which do drag, for example, when Shuri visited Namor's kingdom, but this film would improve if some things were cut out, to put it simply. My next problem and my final problem is how underwhelming the final battle with Namor seems, since I don't think Namor was properly set up as a menace, and we didn't get to spend enough time with Shuri as a hero, but it works where it needs to, and the film does have a great credit scene that pays homage to everything it needs to. Overall, I did not hate this film, but I did need to point out some problems. I just don't feel the need to go back and rewatch it. I give this film a 7.8 out of 10. The final thing I will be talking about today is the Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special, and as with many of the superhero things released this year, I struggle to communicate how I truly feel about them, since I am conflicted on what I think in regards to these shows, special presentations, and movies. This time I will first point out my problems with this special presentation, and my first problem with this special presentation is how it is presented, or more accurately, how it is directed. From what I can tell, the production of this special presentation seems rushed, and that is the downfall of the special presentation. As for James Gunn's style, it feels self-indulgent, having the wacky storytelling, humor, style, vibes, and music of James Gunn without the actual proper implementation of each of these things. A lot of things in and about this special presentation seem, feel, and look cheap, including how the camera is moved, which at some points seem like it is being filmed lazily, completely zoomed out on somebody's phone, and other times feel like it's recording a live concert. To the same degree, near the beginning of the presentation, there is a really good shot of Drax and Mantis slingshotting through space that I'd like to point out. My second problem with this special presentation is how unfocused it feels at times, as Drax and Mantis kind of walk around and do crazy things, and a bunch of things seem to happen by chance, which are played off comedically, but only have such an effect. And my third and final major problem with this special presentation is how random things feel and out of nowhere. My main evidence for this being how Mantis is revealed to, spoilers, 3, 2, 1, be Star-Lord's sister. This was played off so disingenuously and pretty much completely ruined the momentum of the finale of the holiday special for me. Also, it was a complete missed opportunity that Star-Lord was not able to actually spend time with Kevin Bacon and dance with him as a reference to Footloose. But I did overall have fun with the holiday special and have been looking forward to it for a long time. I'm glad it exists, and yes, I did find myself laughing multiple times, and it's just crazy that this kind of thing gets to happen. I appreciate it, and how we get this kind of plot that they just have to kidnap Kevin Bacon. That's kind of awesome. I've even watched it multiple times. Even though some things about this put me off, overall I give this a 8.1 out of 10. Thank you so much for watching this and putting up with the audio.